before we got the first investor, to go back to your question, we had raised more than 5.5 million euros in public funding. And the first investors that came in, our pre-seed round was in 2020. Was actually, we closed that in March 2020, just before the pandemic started, and it was only 2 million. It was only £2 million. So when you look at, okay, we did the public funding for 5.5 million euros, and then we raised much smaller amounts of money from investors. You would think maybe it doesn't balance out. Maybe you try and find another grant and so on, but once you get on that path, and if you get closer to product market fit, you want to have the ability to accelerate things a lot faster. And it's a hard problem to solve, which, I'll be honest with you, does get me out of bed in the morning. If this
That's
was
what
easy and trivial, I don't think I would have nowhere near the same passion and excitement to put in this amount of energy.
I have goosebumps when you explain it. It was like so powerful. So first and foremost, I would ask, how did you get on the list of speakers of How to Web?
Actually, I got on the list through a friend of mine who initially was a startup mentor, but then we became friends over time. He's a very, very good guy, loads of experience, and he was actually the first person we engaged with
Who
as
it
we were
is?
it's a gentleman called Zoltan.
Oh, I had podcast with him previously.
Yeah. So basically, we worked with Zoltan as we transitioned the company from Bots and Us, which was doing robots at a smaller scale for retail. As we were transitioning and pivoting into logistics, we wanted to obviously redesign the business plan, redesign the business model. We wanted to explore the industry in depth and understand what analysis we want to do there. So we worked with Zoltan. He has a very, very streamlined method and very efficient method of optimizing business plan and business models. So we worked with him on how do we adapt what we had, what we knew about the robotics industry, what we knew about what people wanted, and apply that to the logistics industry. So over time, we became friends. Over time, we had other projects together. And then, of course, there was an opportunity. So that's kind of how I got on the speaker list.
Oh, good. So I need to become friends with Zoltan. Good. But objectives in life. But I wanted to understand what you're gonna talk about in How to Web. What will be the
Well,
topic?
it will be definitely related to scaling companies, scaling, building businesses, scaling businesses. I don't want to give everything away ahead of the presentation, but it will also revolve around the journey of scaling a very complex business. We are a full stack company at Dexory. We design, build, manufacture our systems and technology in house. And we also work directly with customers, and we have a global footprint. So combining these three things together, just because we love to make our lives difficult, we're going to be sharing some of the stories and some of the milestones around our journey, and hopefully also get some good audience engagement and be able to share some of the lessons we learned as well.
But I want to get you back a little bit. And one thing that I read about you is the fact that you were an engineer in F1,
Yep.
and I think that that was a dream, as you said, it was a dream that you had. And why? What was the expectations that you had to get there, and then it vanished, and you went to Bots and Us?
Um, I don't think anything vanished in particular. I had that like that I had an achievement. I had achieved what I've worked so hard for a very long period of time, and then I wanted to do something new, something different. But I'll tell you a bit about the story because it actually starts back in Romania. So I was born in Bucharest. I was like I went to school in Bucharest. I mean, I was going to uni there. But then I had this drive and I had this desire to get closer to the world of motorsport. I'm very competitive, and I love sports in general. I used to play basketball. I love team sports. So motorsport was the perfect combination that sort of like ticked all the boxes for the geek in me and the engineer in me, and ticked all the boxes for the competitive side and being able to kind of blend these two together. Because we look at it, but we should not forget that it is a sport at the end of the day. People compete, they win, they lose. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of excitement and drive. So the way I approached it, I mapped it out. I said, okay, where can I? What's the path? And there's no real charted path on how do you get into motorsport. It got a lot more popular now, especially since all the developments that we've seen with Netflix, and since it was sold and it had new management, it became a lot more popular. People speak about it a lot more. But this, when I got into it, or when I was sort of like creating a plan to get into it, this was 15, 16 years ago. So it's 2008, 2009, right? So when I looked at the map, I said, okay, the highest concentration of F1 teams is in the UK. That's pretty much where the sport started from and where it originates from. The highest concentration of manufacturers and industry that supports F1, supports motorsport, is in the UK. I had the advantage because I could speak English, and I could not speak other languages. So clearly, moving to other countries would have been a higher barrier. So I decided that I want to continue my education in the UK. I found that they would offer motorsport degrees, which I didn't get accepted in as a continuation, and I didn't want to restart my studies. So I decided to move to the UK because statistically that would give me the best opportunity to actually get closer to the world of motorsport and to actually get the opportunity to work in this environment.
Okay. So it was a strategic move to be there.
I would say it was a strategic move. It was definitely a deliberate choice. If you look at it, the probably the two options I had was either the UK or America, because
No
the
Germany?
other, well, not because I don't speak German. So
Oh
obviously I
yeah.
did not want to move to another country and learn the language from the start. But Germany is very far behind when it comes to motorsport. I think the myth of the German industry and all that stuff is going through a radical transformation, let's call it these days. But those primarily looking at language barriers and you want to operate at the highest level of performance in a sport. Language and communication skills are hugely important. So obviously that played a factor into the choice. And like I said, this was 2008, 2009. Then I moved over to the UK, and it was that's kind of like just moving over here was when you're at setting yourself up at the starting line.
Very nice. I think that this translates very well into the startup world, where it's again not applying to a job, but trying to get clients and trying to raise funds and going around different rejections to get to where you are. How did you transition from F1 and to bots and us?
So I had after F1, I wanted to move and spend some time working in automotive. Not so much because I really wanted to work in a different industry, but I wanted to see some of the developments in the automotive world around sensor fusion, around tire modeling, and things like that. Pretty engineering specialized geeky stuff, but it was the kind of thing that really excited me. So I wanted to work there. I got a job in automotive. It was during that period that I had the idea of creating what was called initially Bots and Us. And it was a startup that looked at using autonomous robots to collect data from anywhere in the world. Um, and it would put this data on a map. It would put this data in a digital way and provide it to companies so they can run their businesses more efficiently. It was a combination when you look back at it, I think it was a combination of what I was doing in F1, for example, because that's pretty much that was my bread and butter. I would spend a lot of time looking at the data and sensors and being able to relay a story and relay insights to other parts of the team. And it was a combination with an excitement to building a business. So I come from a family of business owners, entrepreneurs. My parents had their own company, so I kind of grew up in that environment. Like you were saying, like a lot of people have this drive and want to create something of their own. So building a business wasn't something scary to me. But I wanted to build a startup that is going to have this high growth. I wanted us to have VC funding because I wanted us to build a big company. Definitely had the vision for a full stack business from the beginning, which when you are 27, 28 years old, first company you ever build is not the easiest thing to fund in the world. So investors won't run towards you and throw bags of money at you. Also, this was in a period when robotics was nowhere near as exciting, or deep tech was nowhere near as exciting as it is today.
Pentru că ai dat de gust, te întrerup să zic că Launchpod dă voce poveștilor de startup-uri românești cu un twist global. Podcastul este o inițiativă a Launch Romania, powered by BCR, cu sprijinul Google și în colaborare cu partenerul nostru fondator, How2Web, și partenerul nostru media, startup.ro. How did you convince the first investors?
So actually, we bootstrapped the company for over 5 years before we got the first investment. So it's a very, very long bootstrapping journey. I'm a firm believer in the principle of
And you bootstrapped having your company, or just putting money aside from the job that you had and you continue creating this MVP?
So at the beginning, I mean, the journey is almost standard. At the beginning, you have to work two jobs because that's just how it works. We pushed for, so we pitched a couple of investors and were not successful at raising any kind of money, but we didn't want to stop. So that's what I was saying. I'm a firm believer in, if something's really important to you, you will find a way to make it happen. So the next big thing was, we looked at public funding. We looked at grants. We looked at a general support from government entities, from the European Union, and so on. So we managed to get the first grant. It was about £100,000. And the match funding we could actually do, because it was a 70-30 match funding. So it was less than £30,000 that we needed to match fund. Then we got the second grant as well, and we could pull together a small friends and family round. So getting some money from our family, putting all our savings into it to do the match funding and to enable us to apply for bigger grants. Before we got the first investor, to go back to your question, we had raised more than 5.5 million euros in public funding. And the first investors that came in, our pre-seed round was in 2020. Was actually, we closed that in March 2020, just before the pandemic started, and it was only 2 million. It was only £2 million. So when you look at, okay, we did the public funding for 5.5 million euros, and then we raised much smaller amounts of money from investors. You would think maybe it doesn't balance out. Maybe you try and find another grant and so on, but once you get on that path, and if you get closer to product market fit, you want to have the ability to accelerate things a lot faster. And grants are not really designed for hyper scaling companies, or companies that want to scale in an ambitious way. They're a lot more bureaucratic. They want you to respect whatever, 12 months, 18 months timeline you have, and so on. So you can't really bring that forward. Even if you do all the work, they're kind of like stuck in sort of like, I would say, antiquated or more classical ways of working. When you're a high ambition, high speed startups, you want to have that freedom to be able to move fast. You want to learn quickly. You want to test things in the market and so on.
Okay. And now, as I was listening, it's happened in 2020, and you started with airports and retail for mapping. And what I saw in 2022, you renamed the company, you changed the ICP,
Yep.
and you went in. What happened in your life that made you make this pivot? Because from my point of view, it's a very hard pivot.
It is definitely a very hard pivot. So what really happened is, if you go back 1 or 2 years before 2020, so 2018, 2019, we had a few projects in retail. We had some interest from a company called MediaMarkt, which is a big electronics retailer, and we were kind of gearing up to do more work with these guys, and then then we had the pandemic. So, of course, during the pandemic, retail was not really the industry looking to adopt new technologies. Everyone was fighting for business survival. There was so much uncertainty, and there was so much ambiguity that people really didn't know how the chips would land.
But
So what happened?
exploded.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was going to say. What happened is a lot of businesses moved online. So logistics became pretty much center stage. People realized that without logistics, without putting proper emphasis on supply chain, putting proper emphasis on their global supply chains and transportations and warehousing and everything else like that, they would not survive as a company, right? It also catalyzed the industry to massively adopt technology. Because what they could do before by using more people, suddenly there were no more people. Suddenly there were restriction. People couldn't work in those environments. And the flip side of this, suddenly there was a large pot of gold here you couldn't really grab because the more you took, the worse it made your operation unless you actually fix the efficiency, unless you actually fix the operation. So what happened to us and for us really was the fact that a lot of people kind of came to us saying, "Hey, look, we've seen this technology. Would you be able to use this in warehouses?" And I will tell you now that it was nowhere near fit for purpose in the form and shape and form it was before. However, I was
It made
very,
me
very
it's like I
bullish.
have goosebumps when you explain it. It was like so powerful.
It is true as well. Like that's exactly what happened. And I was very bullish on the industry. I was very bullish on logistics because it really has this, our technology and our product has the potential to really transform the industry and to really answer a lot of the needs and the big problems and the big pain points that we have. So that's kind of how we got from what we were doing before to logistics. And then we decided that it's an important stage at which we should be rebranding and changing our name because the concept and the product we offer doesn't revolve only around robots. We don't sell robots or we don't produce robot arms. We have a full stack offering, which means we have a digital product, we have a physical product, a fully autonomous robot. We're very proud to say it's the world's tallest autonomous robot. Um, but most importantly, we have this ability. It's a data intelligence platform. That's what we provide for our customers. So the namebots and us was probably geared far too much on the robotics side, whereas when you look at Dexory, it's really revolving around digital twin, extrasensorial perception capabilities and abilities to acquire a depth of information that was impossible to achieve before we launched this product into the market.
Okay. Sounds very nice. How and now that you're telling me the questions that I have, I need to change them, but is the fact that how did you get the first clients? And that's probably one of the biggest challenges that the founders in our days have because you don't have case studies, you don't have a name. Try to go back when you were 28 or 29 and when you entered into the market trying to sell autonomous robots and people were looking at you and like, okay, how did you get the interest?
Now, that is a very interesting question. Um, I'm not sure we have time to go into all the details there, but you have to, I think, at the end of the day, you just have to hustle really hard. You know, you, I'll go back to what I was saying. If it really matters deeply for you to solve the problem or to bring this technology or this product to market or to make this project a success, you will stop at nothing. Like, we were cold calling people. We were messaging everyone on LinkedIn. We were leveraging all the contacts we had. We were leveraging all the connections, friends, family, anyone that had anything to do in the industry. I mean, I'll tell you, when we started in this industry, we didn't even know all the terminology and all the slang and the jargon that people use, but it didn't really matter because we had a vision for where the industry can go. And you will find those early adopters. You will find a handful of people. They're not going to be many. They're going to be very few and far between. But you will find people that will resonate with that vision and will believe in what you are trying to achieve and want to get on board on that journey. And those are, like those people are worth their weight in gold. And those are going to be the first customers. And you will do everything and anything you can to keep those people happy and to make sure that you work closely with them, to make sure that you listen to them. There is a fine balance because you don't want to, if you have a strong vision and you have a strong belief in what you're building, you want to be close to customers, but you don't want to allow yourself to be guided by every single customer demand, because then you become this infinitely customizable thing that is very, very hard to turn into a standalone product. The companies that we admired as founders, I have two co-founders that are with me on this journey. The companies that we admire are the companies like Apple, like SpaceX, the Googles of this world and so on. And they were pretty clear on the kind of products and what they wanted to build. And when you look at something, let's take Apple for example. You look at something that they started with pretty straightforward, clear product vision. Then they had that period where Steve Jobs was not there, and they tried to do everything for everyone, and that didn't work. Clearly, it doesn't work. You will never be able to create the perfectly adaptable product. And then they kind of went back to the basics, and they managed to completely transform pretty much the way we live our lives today, because they
I
were
have
the drivers.
4 Mac devices, so
There is I like, if you want to understand a little bit about the impact that Apple had on the world around you, because these companies, they're called generational companies because they have a huge impact on the world around them. It's the same as Amazon, the same as all the other greats. There's a very, very good book I've read recently, which is called Apple in China, which is not just obviously about Apple's supply chain in China, but it's about their journey and how they went from the initial Mactories. Steve Jobs used to call them Mactories because he had this vision about producing the Mac, and the factories in which they were making them, how they went through the journey of outsourcing, and also how they went through the journey of scaling the product, and how that pans out, how that maps out for global demand when you have to ship a million of something a day. There's not very many people in this world that can ship a million of something a day. And if you think about it, even if it's a digital product, if you have a million customers a day that you're onboarding onto your platform, it's a lot. Those are big numbers.
yes, there is. Oh my God. Yeah, I will go back to what you said about vision. And I think that probably for you sounds something intuitive, that it came out of you and who you are. But if you look back, how you frame the vision for the first customers, like how you envision their life using bots and us or Dexory. Because this is the thing that I hear a lot when it's about founder-led sales. Because people who are doing founder-led sales, they don't sell the features or the outcomes. They sell a vision, a solution to a new life. And how you can dissect it, how did you create it?
This is not something that you only apply to founder-led sales. I think the really, really good salespeople are gonna find a way to inspire you to buy their product. Unless it's some random commodity thing, I don't know, you go in and you buy some whatever daily thing that you cannot live without, a bottle of water
Toothbrush.
or something. Yeah, you don't need to, I mean, water, right? You want to get a glass of water, you don't need to be inspired. You're thirsty. You have that. Obviously, there's an element there about sort of like the need and how burning that pain is. But if you go back to it, like in the world we live today, almost not all the problems, but almost all the big problems have been solved in one form or another. And like you can always have a skeptical view and say, so what? Like, we're fine. We are operating, we're working, as a species, we're making some progress. You can make the argument we could be making a lot more progress. But I think, like this way of inspiring your customers and bringing them on that journey with you is very, very important. And I really want to stress this out because it's not just for founder-led sales. It's for any type of sales, especially when you look at complex sales. And we're a complex company. So the product offering is actually pretty complicated. You have this autonomous robot. What is an autonomous robot, right? We go into warehouses and people are like, what is this thing? So it's
It's
not
the
as
tallest in
common
the
as
world.
it is the tallest in the world. It's also massive. So then they look up and they say, well, what is this massive thing? But it's not omnipresent like we have forklifts in the industry, or like we have the computer, even like we have the smartphone. I mean, let's go back, a few years. what was it, 2005, there were no smartphones. That's kind of when it was starting, when it was picking up, and we all had Nokia phones and phones with buttons and so on. And I remember my first approach and view to the glass phone was like, I don't know, man. I like my buttons. Obviously, there are no more buttons, right? So how do you bring the customers on that journey? Like for me, from what I was telling you earlier, the foundation on which we build the company is that we use autonomous robots to collect data from the physical real world, and we provide this data on a digital format. That's where bots and us pretty much started. We even looked at the house and we said, okay, you could have this little robot around the house and you give you air quality and temperature around the house. You could run your house more efficiently. We very quickly moved away from that because it was not the right market, it was not the right time, and so on. But then we thought, but for businesses, this makes a lot of sense. So we're looking at, okay, we're building this operating system for logistics, or a warehouse operating system, a wider operating system for the physical world, if you think about it, because what the pandemic also showed us is that without logistics, without supply chain, everything stops. It does not matter how much money you have. It does not matter what you want to happen. Like, you can't get anything. You can't even get energy in some cases. If your supply chain relies on diesel, on fuel, and you can't get the fuel there, you're not going to have energy. So it doesn't really matter what you're going to do with all the money in the world. Burn them and generate heat. That's pretty much the only thing you can do. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have medicine. You're not going to have those basic necessities. So it's a big catalyst for us to, and big point of attraction for us to make this better. Like it's a big problem to solve, and it will help us become better, more efficient as a species overall. Now, it's not necessarily how you want to sell it directly to customers, but it's part of how you inspire them to become better, to understand. When you work in something day in, day out, you forget just how important some of these jobs are, right? So when we looked at this, when we looked at the way we did sales, we brought these elements, like we wanted to inspire customers. We explained to them this is like the most advanced robot for data collection in the world. There's an element of pride as well that you want to be utilizing. Um, People want to feel excited about working with you, and this passion for what you're doing, if you should be deeply passionate because you're going to be spending a significant amount of your life working on it. But this passion rubs off on future customers. It definitely rubs off on investors. Like no one's going to invest in someone that's this passionate about what they're doing. And very importantly, it rubs off on the people that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. So you want to bring this passion into the conversation, into the discussions. And like I said, this is not founder-led, founder special thing. The really, really good people are going to be passionate about what they're doing, what they're selling, or they're going to be really good at faking that passion. But I genuinely think that the really good salespeople are passionate and they care about the problem they're solving for the customer. But obviously, they care about the product that they're selling, the technology, the thing that they're selling, really.
How you get excited about the vision that you're selling when the things are not working? Like you're telling that this is probably the best robot in the world, and under the how it's called, the curtain, the things are not working well, and you need to keep pumping the vision. And this is one of the things that I experienced, and it's challenging to be overly enthusiastic, and I will put someone to get into the pilot, and I know that some things are not working well. We are an early stage startup. How you keep being that passionate and enthusiastic?
Um, it's your job at the end of the day. You sign up for it. There's no, I mean that. There's no two ways about it, right? And this is again sort of like not just a startup thing. It's not just a company building thing. This probably the best learnings we can take are from the world of sports here. Like if you play a team sports, because those are the most relevant examples, and you have a coach that you have a bunch of games that you lose. Obviously, everyone gets a little bit demotivated. If you have a coach that comes in and says, "Oh, you know what, guys, there's no point even bothering. Like this is just a complete fiasco. Might as well give up." You have no chance of succeeding, no chance of winning. So your job as a founder is to keep that motivation, is to keep that excitement. Also, your job as a manager is exactly the same. So again, I don't want to make this a founder specific thing. Of course, it's a founder specific thing because um, there's never a highway option for you as a founder, as an owner of that business. If you're not going to be excited and motivated, people around you are not going to come and bring the excitement to you. It's just not going to happen, right? So that is a non-negotiable part of the job, right? And the other part of the job is I'm not a big believer in this whole fake it till you make it kind of thing, but is genuinely strategically cutting corners. Yeah, fine, fake the demo, but are you going to be able to deliver customer value? Because if you know that you're a week away and that thing will work, and you know that customer will take 3 months to make a decision, what's the point in telling them, well, like we're a week away. Okay, fine, we don't really want to talk to you and so on and so forth. Let's speak when it works. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to work well enough for you to prove value. This is where I think a lot of people confuse the famous sort of like Facebook. I think it's Facebook that coined the phrase, or like move fast and break things. That doesn't really apply to all industries, right? Like you can move fast and break things in software. It's really easy. It's trivial to revert back. So you go back to whatever other solution you had. Fake it till you make it again. Very easy in software because you can have someone else pulling the demos in the background. You can have, especially in this day and age with AI, you don't even have to fake anything. You can show the presentations. This is how it's gonna work. We have all these things. Obviously, if you're not going to be able to deliver value to that customer, they're not going to buy the solution. So you have to be pragmatic to a point of knowing how am I going to be able to support this customer? Especially going back to what we were discussing, the early stage customers, the early ambassadors, they need to be your absolute diehard advocates, right? Now, if the solution is very simple, you don't need to create the end-to-end technology and automate everything. You don't want to make it scale to 50,000 users when you're going to have 2 users, right? You make it in a way that it will never work for, I don't know, more than 50 people. But don't worry about that because you do not have 50 people using your product right now. Don't worry about, let's look back at the first or like um, iPhone demos. They're complete disasters. Like this is a known fact. I mean, I think Steve used like something like four, five, six, seven, eight phones because every phone had different apps running at different stages. And I think the guys that were and the team that was actually behind them, they were when the whole thing was announced and the product was announced, they were having shots for every successful feature that was demoed and when it didn't fail. Now, that's a really good example because at the end of the day, the real world, the world of business works to deadlines, works to very, very hard targets. And whoever doesn't believe in this absolutely doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. Because you, as a business owner, you have a target every month to pay the people that are on board this journey with you. So, the salaries are not going to be negotiable. That's a pretty hard target. That's a pretty hard deadline because the mortgages and everything else that depends on that salary and on you providing that is non-negotiable, right? So there will be really hard targets. There will be really hard, ambitious milestones to hit. Now, it's really important to go back to what we were discussing at the beginning. How do you keep that motivation? For founders, like I said, it's non-negotiable. For the people that you hire and the managers, that's a skill that you need to make sure that you screen for because it's easier earlier days when you're a small team and you interact with everyone. As you grow, you want to make sure that people bring on board that journey have the ability to keep that cynicism and sort of like the skepticism, keep that at bay and make sure that they bring the best self and they bring that motivation to the team because things will be really hard. Like some of the things we're working on here, they take weeks to build and then we break them in 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. And or it's a success and then it takes months to validate. So that's how it works. So you got to keep that team excited because they've literally spent 12 hours a day for the past week and it got broken in 5 minutes. So if you go, oh, okay, it is what it is, people are gonna be like, well, why did we Where's the context? Why did we actually put in all the hard work? What did we learn? What we do? What are we doing different? So you have to be able to catalyze that excitement into people and mobilize them. And it's definitely a combination of factors. I don't really have. You asked a hard question. I don't have a short and, and simple answer to that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like one of the things that I understood early when I get into this world of startups is the fact that no one is there for the emotional help. You just need to grind and go one day or another and push it just to get to that point. And that, from my point of view, one of the things that founders need to understand. But at the same time, you're jumping from a secure way of living and you're in a job, and then you jump into messy waters and the reality is different. Your past helped you do that, or you had different stages where you have to shift your mentality of now we are building a startup, it's another world, we need to be more mindful of what we are doing and how we behave, this sort of stuff.
When you say my past, you mean my
Your past
own
as in
background?
seeing your family and seeing your family that had a business and you saw some things like my father was an entrepreneur and I saw him coming at late in the night because he had to work and I understood that it will be a lot of hustle and it all about many nights when he wasn't sleeping and so on. So I got a little bit acquainted with the idea of being a founder, and there are people who didn't saw that at home. So when they went into the startup entrepreneurship life, it's way different.
I mean, yeah, definitely your past experience will shape how you are and what you do in life, right? But I don't think that necessarily needs to be I don't think that needs to be a filter in any way. So, I mean, it is what it is. Some people have entrepreneurs in their families, some people are small business owners and so on, and some don't, and they still go on to build incredible businesses. I think it helps a lot to have I don't want to call it a support network, but to have some support from people. But it's it's difficult, and it's difficult for us in Europe when you look across pretty much the entire continent because there's not that many success stories like you have in the US, right? I think that's one of the big differences, and it is fact. That's factual, right? Like you were saying that you have so many Apple products around you, you know, these big companies that have shaped the world and are still driving the shape of the world that we have around us. They don't, well, most of them don't come from Europe. Some of them do, but that's changing rapidly because it's just how the world evolves. And I think there's a big element of risk taking here, and it's different for different people, right? If you have a family, you have kids, it's a different risk profile that you'd be comfortable with supporting and kind of subjecting yourself and the family to, um, versus someone that has no family, they're just supporting themselves. Like, fine, you know, I can just do whatever I want, and no one really depends on me. Um, and obviously, as you grow the business, there will be people that you hire and people that you employ that will depend on you. So those are very important, sort of like risk profiles and how do you run the business. However, I would say it should not stop you. We go back to what we were discussing. We go back to the fact that, you know, if you really care deeply about something, you will find a way to make it work. And look, I came from, my parents had a family business, and that family business was in the apartment we lived in. So in the living room, they had, you know, like a couple of desks and they were taking phones and so on, so phone calls and so on and so forth. I had absolutely zero exposure to motorsport and the world of F1, and it didn't stop me. Like I said, look, I don't care. I'm doing this. It does not matter. I had loads of people that said I was crazy. Like some of my best friends were like, man, you're just not being realistic about these things. And I was like, yeah, I don't need to be realistic because I know I'm going to be able to achieve. And and I told you after I got to the UK, it still took 127 applications to get there. And I even said no to a bunch of opportunities. Like had the opportunities to work with a couple of the F1 teams here and have a factory job, and I wanted to be trackside. And I said no. I can tell you, it drove my mom crazy because she was like, "Why are you doing? Like, why would you say no? Like, this is what you want." I was like, "No, man, this is not what I wanted. It's getting closer, but it's not exactly what I wanted." So you keep pushing and you keep finding ways to get closer and closer and to get to that goal. And I'll give you another example. Like we were fundraising and we spoke to the best investors in Europe, the team from Atomico. And this guy said no to us multiple times, 3 times before. And it didn't matter. Like we kind of kept in touch with them and so on. And when we showed them what we're doing around the product as it is now, they basically decided they made the investment decision. And probably, I think within 2 weeks, we had the term sheet. So they moved super fast. They kind of built that conviction and just catalyzed that. Because, and one of the things, if you ask them, one of the things that it really resonated with them was the resilience in which we approached the business, which is never gave up. If you give up, that is single-handedly the highest risk any startup scale, any company has. The founders just give up on it. If the founders give up on it, that's it. It's gone. There's no amount of management buyout and PE firms in the world that will make it a bigger success than that founding team and the founders kind of pushing that business and completely reinventing and making that business a success.
Nice. What was the thing that it was, and now I'm trying to understand, because when you pivoted, you still did robots and autonomous robots, but you moved it into another industry. But it didn't change the way that you sold and the people who were you serving, and like how besides the naming and the use case, what changed in bots from us to Dexory as a business?
Uh, to be honest, everything changed.
Okay.
So the the concept of a robot, yeah, find an autonomous robot which has some wheels and motors and computers and sensors, but that's just generic description of a robot. We've completely redesigned, re-engineered the technology stack from the ground up, right? So we looked at a completely new way of creating the product, the hardware per se, the mechanics of the robot. We used to have a robot that was 2 meters tall, and then we made a robot. The first generation of this technology was 12 meters tall. As you can imagine, it's a massive difference between them. The way you would navigate, the way you would map the space, like the earlier stages and earlier versions that we had, they could barely map a store the size of, I don't know, let's say 50 meters by 50 meters. And it was struggling. And this technology we have now will go into a 2 million square feet warehouse that's 500 meters by 500 meters, let's say, or over 2 million square feet, and it will map that without any problems. And it will navigate and it will robustly operate in these environments. And when you look at it, if you were to apply a very cynical lens to it and say, oh, this will never work. It barely works now. How are we ever going to make this work? Well, we did because we really cared about solving the problem, finding talented people, finding exciting people that want to work on those problems, want to solve those problems. Um, so we completely transformed the entire tech stack. And even when you look at it now, the way our digital platform needs to operate, the amount of data we ingest in it, we have well over 500 million pallet locations scanned, which means I think by the end of November we'll be going over 1 billion, because that's been a very, very fast rate of growth. But that means that databases needed to be of a certain type and certain size. But don't worry, we did not try to make everything scale from the beginning. I think we rewrote those databases like 5 times because the growth of the business was good. And we said, look, we don't need to make this work for 5,000 customers early on because that would take a long time. And we also don't know how this is going to shape and evolve. So you kind of like you make the trade-offs, you cut some corners, but you know that when you get close to 50 users and 50 robots into your platform, you need to rewrite that. What's really important is to make sure that you have the resources to be able to support that. Because it goes both ways, right? If you invest all your money up front and it's not the right thing, you've created a great platform, but it's not really what's going to help you at scale. You still need to rewrite it. You've wasted all your resources. And if you accumulate all this tech debt and all this debt in general, because it could be tech debt, it could be sort of like operation process debt and so on, and you do not have the resources in time, in money, in the people you employ and the team you build to be able to address that quickly, then you're going to have also a problem.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sounds huge. And I believe that it's one hell of a road. And it's a
It's
nice.
definitely exciting and it's a hard problem to solve, which I'll be honest with you, does get me out of bed in the morning. If this
That's
was
what I'm saying.
easy and trivial, I don't think I would have nowhere near the same passion and excitement to put in this amount of energy. I do like this complex
But in the
element of it.
beginning, when you didn't found this hard problem, because yeah, it comes up the Andrew Horowitz hard things about hard things. I don't know if you know the book.
Of course I do.
And in the beginning, you weren't, or how did you saw the problem? Did it in the beginning it was a hard problem for you to solve, or you looked at a smaller problem and now you figure out a hard thing to solve?
I think it was a hard problem from the beginning. So the way we looked at it is said, okay, we're going to use autonomous robots to collect data and create this digital version of the world where we put the data. It was a 2D map because this was very many years ago, so 3D wasn't as popular to build straight away. But then very quickly became a 3D. We said, okay, we want to make digital twins of this environment. And I'm very bullish and very fixated on the fact that you can create this interconnected world where you can have complete visibility over your entire supply chain. You can pretty much, with the latest developments in AI now, you can pretty much copy paste intelligence from one center to another. It's obviously not trivial, and it's not so much that the challenge is, oh, how do you create an amazing robot? No, the challenge is how do you scale this product to have thousands and thousands of users whilst continuously perfecting the technology you offer. So it's been a hard problem from the beginning. Like I said, even the people that you have on your team are gonna be sometimes stuck by it because they think, okay, this is like building so many companies into one. How are we ever going to be able to pull it through? Well, we have clearly. We're here today having this conversation, and there's people that have achieved even more amazing things in shorter amounts of time. When you look at so either historic examples, if you look at some of the work done in Skunkworks in Lockheed Martin's special ops team, or you look at some of the stuff that people have done in SpaceX, or some of the developments in our own field around AI and so on.
Okay, okay, good. I have three more questions very shortly. First, tell me three books that you mentioned in the beginning that it shaped how you look now at building a company.
A really good one, which sits incredibly close to my heart, is Winning by Tim Grover.
Okay.
Tim Grover used to be Michael Jordan's and Kobe Bryant's strength coach. That has completely transformed the way I interact and look at building companies, building teams, and so on. Um, Another one, they're quite, I would say, maybe quite seasonal as well, because it depends on what stage of the business.
Now that you have.
Another really good one that I tend to always go back to is The Art of Start by Guy Kawasaki.
Okay.
Art of Start 2.0, Guy Kawasaki. He was an early Apple evangelist, but I think that book is an absolute Bible. So I used to go back at it, up to the Series B pitch deck, and I still go back at it for look at various chapters and so on. So I absolutely love that book.
I
Um,
received that book when I wasn't prepared. Like I received it when I was 24 or 25. And now that you're saying it, I have it in hometown in Botoshan in in my library. So very good.
I mean, look, that is one of the absolute best resources you can have. I genuinely believe that. I think it answers some of the questions that you asked me on the podcast as well. So, like when you look at that stuff, you think, okay, how do I pitch? How do I find the early customers? What do I do about this stuff? And the third one, let me think. The third one. A really good one that I liked in terms of, I think in terms of the company building and what it takes, that is quite appropriate to where we are today is Jensen Huang's from NVIDIA, his biography, The NVIDIA Way.
Yes.
But that's a little bit more specific. I don't think it's necessarily shaped the way I look at things. Probably a book that really shaped the way I would look at things is Extreme Ownership. I don't know if you've known that one.
Yes. No, extreme ownership, it's very, very good. The question is, what's one terrible sales rule that you broke that paid off? Something that you had as a mental model about sales and you broke it and it helped you.
Yeah, I think the classical one with under promise and over deliver. Yeah, not big believer in that. I'm much more on the side of over promise and over deliver. Um, I think I don't understand why you would want to under promise and over deliver. I think if you over promise and over deliver, you're much better off. So I definitely encourage everyone to over promise and over deliver.
Nice. And what slide from your pitch deck, if you have to create a new one now, you will always include? Which is the most important slide from your pitch deck?
It's a fairly easy one. Our pitch decks look a little bit different than the standard, but I think the one that you wanna lead with always not lead with, but the one that you always want to have included is your team slide. So it's, I mean, I can be making all these references to team sport and all that stuff, like, but the team and the achievements that team has had together as an entity, because you could have incredible people. I didn't say sort of like personal bios or anything like that. No, the team. How does that team work together? What has that team created? I think that is absolutely fundamental. And it doesn't have to be big logos. I'm really not a believer in sort of like big company logos and past performances. No. What did that team brought together as that unit there? What did they achieve as a team? I think that's absolutely fundamental.
Good. Thank you very much, Andrei. Looking forward to see you in 1 month at How to Web. Știu, e finalul podcastului și vreau să-ți mulțumesc că ai ajuns până aici. Și în același timp partenerilor BCR, Google, How to Web și Startup.ro. Iar până la următorul episod, ca să ai ce face, te așteptăm pe launch.ro, să intri în comunitatea Launch Romania, unde găsești evenimente și inițiative Loved by Launch. Bye!